Welcome to Dad Pod, a community for dads and men.
You gotta love them boys. I'm hanging with my boys. Just me and my boys.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Dad Pod, joined by my co-host and father, Troy. Welcome, Dad.
Hey,
Excited to talk about It's Not About the Nail tonight. So It's Not About the Nail is an old YouTube video that is supposed to be comical, but there's some truths to it and some things that we can glean from it as fathers and as husbands. And so we're gonna watch it, and we are going to digest a couple principles that it talks about in there, and go over a little bit of what those mean to us, and maybe even a couple stories about how listening is normally better than talking. So, without further ado, Dad, we're gonna watch it here.
fire away.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Try to see things my
Well, there you go.
That one gets me. I can watch it over and over again, and it's just funny.
Yeah.
Applicable.
I mean, I can think back to so many conversations I've had with other relationships I've had, my wife, with even my friends and other people, right? That we just need to shut up and listen.
Well, this is what really it gets into what's the difference between men and women, and that's a generalization, of course. But I know with your mother, Clay, she and I, that's my tendency. Is I just want to fix the problem. If you're coming to me with something that's an issue, my immediate reaction is I want to fix it. Okay, well, if it's a problem for you, it's a problem for me. How can I fix it? And I just want to go right to solutions. And I know she's just wanting to. She doesn't want me to solve it. She just wants to talk to somebody. So it took me years to figure that out. So if you guys can get ahead of that, you're much brighter than I was, and still am. I still don't necessarily do it right. So
Isn't it funny? We still need to practice. It's like somehow we still know the principles, right? It's like in the back of my head, but it takes practice, just like anything else does, And there's this thing, just our emotional need for significance, and I'll read a quote about that specifically. Right? Is it takes so much emotional discipline to just push that back and push back against your emotional need to cut people off, to respond as quickly as you hear something and you just want to butt in and say something, right? Whether here, you're trying to solve the problem, or whether you're just trying to relate in some way and you're trying to cut people off, just be quiet, make them feel significant and important, right? Make them feel important, and things will go a lot better for you.
Well, and I think you alluded to something. You didn't really say it too, made the point too much, but I think I'm guilty of this. Is I'm already starting to think of a reply, and I'm not really listening to them all the way through. Right? I'm like, okay, oh, I'm jumping to what I'm going to say back to them, and maybe I missed some of the conversation, or I missed some of the points that they were trying to make too. So I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, 100%, right? And when you're formulating a response in your head, you're going to miss what they say. You're going to miss what they say. And that could mean the difference between you know, being able to solve the problem, and you completely understanding their situation and empathizing, and you coming off as just trying to solve the problem and move on to the next thing, right?
I think that's it too, Clay. I think you're exactly right. I think unless we're listening to understand and listening to empathize with them, we're really not going to make that connection.
Yeah, because it's not about them. When you're already trying to formulate a response, it's
Yeah.
about you. You are trying to figure out what to say next so that you don't sound dumb, or that it's not about you, right? And the quicker that, and I'm emphasizing that because I'm trying to smack that in my hard head, like, it's not about me. It's not about, the sooner that you can figure that out, the happier relationships you're going to have. And not just with your spouse or with your kids, but with everyone. It's that way. Right. And that's how the best leaders lead. And that's how all the legends in history, that's how I imagine that they were, right? The Yodas, the Mr. Miyagi's, right? They knew how to have emotional discipline to make the other people feel important.
Yeah,
And
and you know what? In conversations, I'll share a story, just a really quick one. And this has probably happened a number of times to between mom and I, but we'd be driving on a road trip or down the road, even driving home or something, and she'd say, "Hey, are you hungry?" And I'm like, No, I'm not hungry," and I just keep on driving, right? When in reality, if I was listening to her, she was telling me, "I'm hungry. Can we stop for something?" Because and I just totally missed that cue, right? So
100%, yeah, because I mean, you could try to think like, why would she say that? You
yeah,
know? And if you thought, oh, maybe she's suggesting it because she wants to eat something,
yeah,
you know? And women definitely, at least in my experience, I'm not going to speak for all. I'm not going to try to make a generalization. I'll only speak from my experience. They tend to drop hints because they want you to kind of go above and beyond, to think a little bit, right? To use our brain, and and try to figure that out, um, and what they're trying to say. And so if we would have just thought, because I know how you are because of how I am, but when I'm driving, I'm like got a one track mind going on. I'm on
I
a
just
completely
want to get
different wavelength than my wife or my significant other. And she's like, "Oh, you hungry?" No, I'm not hungry.
that's
What
right.
is what am I going to do for work? What's this thing? I got to solve this problem at work, or I got to solve this problem at home. How am I going to do that? And you just like go back to your one track instead of taking that step back and going, okay, hold on. Why did she say that? It's not about me. How can I fix this part of what's going on, and how can I listen and try to tune in rather than get stuck in your one track mind like I do. But that kind of goes back to the point I wanted to highlight first about how men and women think differently, right? And there is a study. I'm gonna say it this time. I'm gonna find it. Uh, but there's a study that was done about little babies who were at the age of about crawling, and the study was that the girls who were set on the floor, and there was an obstacle put between the baby girls and the baby boys, their reactions were different to when they were set on the floor and the parents or the mom would leave the room, and how they would solve the problem of getting their mom to come back or catch their mom's attention. And so the girls would cry, and they would sit and they would just try to vocalize, "Hey, I need help, someone come," and they communicated more. The boys on the other side of that were they would put blocks up in the way, right? And the boys would go around the blocks, or they would push over the blocks to go try to find mom. And so I'll put the study in once I found it, but I found a cool reel on Facebook that talked about it, and they cited it in there. So I don't want to sound like I'm lying or that I'm just trying to come up with some random thing. But it is interesting because it highlights those differences between how men and women think. And it's important to understand that so that we can do a better job of our communication and our listening methods, right? And understanding that we think different. So we have to try to act outside of ourselves and think outside ourselves to reach beyond and help our relationships. But yeah, that comes back to, that active listening aspect, which again, the video kind of highlights, right? He wants to solve the problem. She goes, "That's not what I need. I just need for you to listen." And even when, even when she said that, he's like, "No, I think what you need is to do this." She's like, "No, you're not even listening now." He's like, Fine, I'll listen."
But even if you notice his eye, he did a pretty good job acting with his eyes too, because she was talking and he was kind of going, you okay? And maybe he
I'm not
wasn't really
interested.
listening to her
Yep.
sincerely, because at the end he's like, I really, I'm so sorry, or whatever he
No,
said.
he goes, "That sounds really
That's
hard."
See, I wasn't even listening. That sounds really hard. Sounds really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was not really totally engaged with it, I don't.
Yeah. And again, that comes back to, normally we just want to solve the problem. And I know that's the case for me, where I'm just like, and I'll give you a story, right? Just my daughter a few weeks ago, she was having an issue, and I can't remember if she fell and she got hurt or what happened. This seems to happen on the daily, by the way. And I've learned from the one experience that I'm going to act this way, but she did something and she started to cry. And so I came over, and instead of instantly trying to solve the problem when a child is crying, it's like my brain goes, "I don't want to listen to that anymore. Please fix the problem."
That's why it goes up down your spine. At least it doesn't mean stop the crying, stop
It's
the
like,
crying.
yeah, it's like poking at your head. And so it's like, I got to fix the problem.
Yep.
And this time I tried to endure it a little more, have a little more emotional discipline. And so I sat down with her. And with kids especially, they just need an emotional anchor where if you're stable, they can also know that they can become stable and you're not adding to the fuel to the fire, right? So I came over, I held her close, and all I did was just say, that sounds, "I'm so sorry, Irie, that sounds so hard." And I held her close, and 10 seconds later, she was all done crying. Oh, she was trying to put her socks on. That's what it was. And she was getting frustrated. And so I let her put her socks on. She figured it out. She put her socks on, and she went playing like nothing ever happened.
She
And
solved it herself.
so, yeah, she solved it herself. And so, I could have made it worse. I could have come over angry, like, "What's your problem?" Or whatever, added to the issue, and then, just tried to solve the problem instantly instead of just coming over and listening and being more emotionally stable than I otherwise would have. And so, that was with my daughter. But again, this same can be said of, the conversations I've had with my wife, where it's like, she'll give me something on the that's going on, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to problem solving mode. I'm going to stand up and walk and solve whatever the thing is, whether it's the trash or whatever she's talking about, right? Having an adult conversation at the end of the day.
One other thing that happens, I think, Clay, sometimes is that when we're listening and we're thinking of responses, sometimes we may relate to them and we want to share a response of our own, right? That's very similar, or maybe in some cases might even be more difficult than the one they're sharing. Tell
More
me a little bit
extreme.
about your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we have a tendency to do this, and I know one of my good friends, I'm not going to name him specifically, but he and I had a tendency to one up each other in our conversations, right? If I'd hurt myself and I'd hurt my shoulder or rolled my ankle doing some sort of sport thing or whatever, he's like, "Oh, I remember when I broke my ankle. That was so hard," and did this, and he was like, "Oh," and I instantly was like, "Oh, cool, he made it about you." That's cool. And I like didn't want to engage in the conversation because I didn't want that, you know. I wanted to just have that be about me and my issues, you know.
And so
So
what did that do to your relationship? It kind of puts a little bit of a negative on it, right?
yeah, I mean, in that moment, right? I kind of tuned out a bit because I was excited or you know I wanted to talk about me for a bit, right? And so you know it's fine. I don't think it was a big deal because it was you know between me and him, but you know in that moment I stopped and he kind of interrupted me because you could tell he was really excited, right? He heard me say something and he got really excited and wanted to you know to butt in and kind of interrupted me to tell his story before I got too far along in mine before he forgot something. And I do this too because I get really excited and my mind goes really fast and I'll forget when someone's like, well, what was I talking about?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. And that's the hard part to remember. It doesn't matter what, you know, help the other person feel. And this is their moment. Help them feel significant, help them feel important. You know, that's part of the, you know, the how to win friends and influence people, you know, playbook. But
Well, and we'll have
like,
at some point in time we'll have our turn, right? So where we are telling our stories, and it is, just remember when it's your turn to listen, which is like you said, takes emotional discipline.
yeah, I mean, exactly. And I think it's the key practice here is to listen with the intent to hear what they're saying and to understand it rather than to just respond. And it's okay to not have a response right away. It's okay to pause, right? That silence, it really helps in conversations. And I come from an industry, you know, in sales where this takes a lot of practice to not interrupt what people say. And so you know, because it kills relationships, kills conversations. And you know, if you come off as not likable, you're not gonna move that relationship further, and eventually you're not gonna win the deal because they might not even realize that that's what you did. They just know how they felt when they talked to you, and you're not gonna progress any further because you know what, I don't really like that guy. I can't really figure out why, but I don't really like him. Or they might know exactly why, and they might say he just cut me off and one up me with his story, so he's only concerned with himself, you know.
Well, and I work in an industry similar to yours, Clay, where there are big negotiations that occur. And in negotiations, sometimes the silence can be, it's hard. People's normal tendencies want to fill the silence. And so
Yep.
staying quiet in negotiations often leads to the other person or the other party giving up information or giving up their, something that they may not have given up otherwise. So having that discipline to just let the moment be quiet can be rewarding in many different ways.
100%. And Chris Voss talks about that actually. So when we talk about negotiations and it's really cool. That book is amazing, by the way. It's like Jedi mind tricks. Um,
Never split.
and yep, never split the difference. He talks about mirroring, right? So you mirror what the other person says to know that you're active. So you let them know they're actively listening. And he talks about staying quiet. Let the mirror do the work. He talks about actively, you know, he calls it labeling, right? And calibrated with calibrated questions, right? So and then you be silent and let your questions and let the active listening do the work. And listening is so important, by the way. I'm not going to say, well, you have two ears and one mouth, so listening is more important. You know, that's what everybody says. But the the thing with the FBI, and I thought that was really cool in his book, is he talks about they have three people, you know, 3, 4, 5 people listening on a negotiation for a hostage, right? Because if you only have one person, it's so important to you know to that situation that they miss completely. One person misses what the other person interpreted, right? And that it's so if you think you can handle listening to your wife with just yourself and you won't miss things if you're trying to not actively listen, or you think you can be distracted and be on the phone or you know do something else, you're wrong. And I'll say that from experience. You are completely wrong. You are completely wrong. I will miss things because and you'll make fun of me because mom is like, "Hey, Clay, are you there? Hello?" So, you're absent minded, and I have a tendency to get sidetracked and, squirrel, right?
Well, I think we need to make some clarification on this call too, Clay. We are not intending to have this be a negotiation with our spouse or with our children or whatever. So it's not because typically negotiations have a
You have an outcome that you desire. Yeah.
yeah, or it's has a negative connotation to it, and so that's not
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. We're talking about the ability and the skill set to listen with intent to understand.
100%. That's a great clarification. Yeah. I'm not intending for everyone to go into a thing and thinking I'm going to win this game. I'm going to extract the most from this conversation that I can. No, the point is to be able to listen better so that you have better relationships with your spouse, with your children, and with other people who are in your sphere of influence and friendship. So no, thank you for the clarification. I'm hoping people didn't think of that as, wow,
Yeah.
every time I talk to Clay, he just wants to extract something from me.
Or we got out of this episode, we want to negotiate we learned some skills to negotiate with our spouse.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So again, principle number one is practicing in my mind, right? Practicing and pausing, taking a breath. So that will help you to take a step back and realize, okay, I'm listening with the intent to listen and understand. And then, the other one is don't offer solutions without them requesting it, right? The wife in the video is like, no, I don't
try
need
to
you to
solve
solve that.
it.
Yeah. You're just trying to fix it when I just need you to listen, right? And that's 100%. That's 100% the things I want to look at on this episode. And then again, actively listen without the intent to respond, right? And that will help in your relationships. There's one last thing about the emotional aspect, Dad, that I wanted to cover here really quick.
Yeah, do it.
I wanted to read from it's Sales EQ. It comes from Jeb Blunt. He kind of outlines different emotional needs that we have, right? So he talks about, fear, insecurity, desperation, attachment, and worry, and how those things can derail our relationships when we feel those things, and how our interactions with others occur. The one that hits me a lot, and when we interrupt people in conversations and one up them specifically with our stories or whatever, when we interrupt, comes from the need for significance. And one of the coolest quotes in here that I think about all the time is, the most insatiable human need is the need to feel important or significant. This egocentric need can become one of your most disruptive emotions when left unchecked. Your need to feel important can cause you to be so focused on yourself that you pitch and pontificate, talk over other people, fail to listen, and arrogantly talk about yourself. These behaviors destroy emotional connections with others. And so when we talk about that emotional discipline, now you guys can think about that, right? Don't let your emotional need to feel significant and to feel heard crowd or overshadow the other person who's going through something, right? And make them feel important, and everything else will work out fine. And like you said earlier, Dad, as we were talking kind of about that, is it'll be our turn eventually, right?
Yeah. Everybody has a turn, whether you necessarily want one or not. I don't know if there's some out there that don't want to be that center of attention and have a great skill set for listening. And everybody knows that one friend that everybody goes to to talk to because they have good listening ear. There's those folks out there, and I know of a few myself.
Yeah, I mean, how many conversations have you walked away from where the other person says one thing, like that active listener, the person who's really good that you just mentioned, right? The person you constantly go back to speak with.
Yeah.
You always feel really good. Oh, they're so cool. They're such a great conversationalist. They make me feel, and you feel really good about yourself, right? And they didn't say anything about themselves because they helped you feel important, right?
Exactly.
And you're like, oh, that was a great conversation. What conversation? I said two things,
Well, and that's a real talent. That's a real gift, and some people really have that, and they have a large impact on those that they are friends with. Or
Yeah, but don't take that the wrong way too. It's a gift. Some people do have that gift, but it's also practiced, right? It's not something that
Yeah.
people are just born with too. Some people might be more inclined to it, but you can absolutely learn that and practice and become better at it 100% because because I've gotten better over the course of my years, so I know it's something that can be worked on and you can get better at.
so, yeah, there's three things, Clay. I think that you
Yeah, as
kind
the
of
call to action here.
teased up. Yeah, call to action. You
Yeah,
want to?
so let's practice those pauses, right? So when someone comes to talk to you and I promise this is more conversations with your spouse than not, because I know for me, when my wife is talking to me, don't zone out. I will do that. I'm very bad at that, and something I'm getting better at is okay, this is an important conversation, and I would take most conversations you have with your kids or with your spouse very seriously. Um, and
Oh,
especially for those of you that are going to the office, you don't have very many through the course of the day with them, and make it the most of those times. And so pause, put down the phone, put down whatever distraction you have, and engage with them in conversation. Make eye contact. Yeah, you were going to say that, right? Yep. Make eye contact and make sure they know that you're listening. Don't do what he did in the video and go, that sounds really hard. Although you may have to start there, right?
it's true, because I know I do it, but especially our children, I think making that eye contact and actually getting down on your knees and looking them eye to eye on the same level or height, I think makes a huge difference.
100%, Dad. Yeah. That has made a huge difference in my ability to parent because I see a bunch of cool reels and I'm going to start sharing stuff on my website for you guys so you guys can see some of these things that offer good parenting skills from child psychologists. Some of the things will vibe with you guys and some of the things won't, which is fine. But one thing that has drastically helped me is when I want them to do something, hey, go sit at the table instead of shouting and from a distance and going, hey, get up at the table. I've asked you 4 times to go sit at the dinner table. Okay. Something else that's really helped is, like you said, Dad, making eye contact. So instead of shouting, something I've done is pause, realize that I'm feeling frustrated. My need to feel significant or my need to feel heard by my kids is taking over. I pause, let my brain take over and go, okay, I'm going to go make eye contact. I'm going to go get on their level. I'm going to stop the distraction, whatever is distracting them. And I'm going to look at them in the eyes and I'm going to say, I'm so glad you're playing and you're playing happily. It's time for dinner. We're going to go sit down at the dinner table. And I make sure that they're making eye contact. It's worked wonders for me. So not just with your kids, but with other people too. Make sure they know you're actively listening and you're there with them. Because if you're not, they're not going to listen to a word you say.
All right, actively listening. What's
Yep.
number 2?
Yep. Actively listen without the intent to respond. And number 3, don't offer solutions unless they're requesting it, right? Just listen in.
Awesome.
And that will help solidify our legacy, right? That's part of our story, right? Do we want to be known as that really cool friend that people can come talk to because we help them feel good, right?
Constant state of development, right?
Mhm.
Learning, getting better.
Yep, and we're gonna fail. I know I will, but the more I practice and the more I put these things in the front of my mind, the better I get, and I see it. I see it every day. I mean, just today, I had some slip ups where I shouted from across the room because I was getting frustrated. That need to feel heard, uh, that need to not be disrespected by my kids, or that feeling right took over, and so I acted a little bit out of place and more forcefully took hold of the situation when I could have had more emotional discipline, and so I regret that. I it wasn't too extreme, but it was enough to go, I know better, I can do better. So anyway, that's me trying to live my legacy. And so with that, everybody, let's take those challenges and let's go be better active listeners. Let's go. It's not about the nail. It's not about us. It's about them. And let's be good listeners and be good husbands, fathers, and friends. Anything else to add, Dad?
No, live your legacy. I think you're well ahead of where I was, Clay. I can't say that I remember doing those things as your father. So it's
No,
generation.
I can remember a few times, but we'll talk about those on other episodes. But I definitely remember times where we'd come and have a more formal sit down. You didn't necessarily. I don't remember the one-offs where they were really quick, like, hey, let's get down on your level and talk to you. But I do know that we had more form. You made things more formal in terms of conversations if there was something big that was going on. But
All
which
right.
which was a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. So everybody, let's live our legacy. Let's take these 3 things and be good active listeners. And come join us on the next episode. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.